Hello everybody and welcome to ChessDiagnostic. This is Andrew and I just want to say thank you for all the feedback I got from the Taimanov and Larsen match. I'm going to make those games, but before I do, I want to cover one game that I've really looked at. There's a series of 4 games between Mikhail Tal and Alexander Tolush that really show Mikhail Tal's psychological play when it comes to tactics. So he beat Alexander Tolush, a strong grandmaster, in every single game they played. He never lost or drew once against this player. So why was he able to do that? Well, let's see what happens in this game. It starts off with d4, Mikhail Tal's white, and we get knight to f6, c4, e6, and after knight to c3 and bishop to b4, we're in the Nimzo-Indian. Now, it's a somewhat misnomer that Mikhail Tal was just a reckless and intuitive player. He was actually very strategically sound. He knew tons of openings, and he was amazing in the endgame. What his real genius was and why he won so many games against the world's best players was because he was able to intuitively feel what his opponents would play, even though it might not be the best. And that's a very hard skill. It's somewhat like poker. But in this game, we see it very clearly. So his opponent, Tolush, would always go for the most complicated lines against Tal, which is a pretty terrible strategy because Mikhail Tal is the world's best tactician. So after e3, we see c5, a very dynamic and aggressive continuation in the Nimzo. Black could have just castled instead of playing c5, going for d5 and b6, fianchettoing that bishop, but instead we see a lot of tension. So c5, knight to f3, and then d5. Putting as much pawn tension in the center, and a lot of possibilities. Bishop to d3, castles, castles. So we're heading towards the middle game with good piece development, and then knight develops a3. So a very standard move. Normally the bishop would take, doubling white's c-pawns, and black's strategy would really be to play rather strategic, try to go for an endgame, and just attack these weaknesses of white. We don't see that here. We see pawn takes. Again, going for as many complications as possible. And Tal is very tactically accurate, so he plays knight takes, creating a somewhat unbalanced and unfamiliar, unorthodox position. After pawn takes that bishop, we see pawn takes, bishop takes on c4, knight attacks, bishop goes back. So we're getting these trades, and actually, after all these trades, pawn takes, bishop takes, actually black could take the queen, leaving white with a slightly better endgame because of his 2 bishops and active pieces, but he does have these doubled b-pawns. So again, instead of playing that sound strategy, Tolush goes for more complications. After bishop takes, we see knight from b to d5, attacking the bishop and the b-pawn. Tal simply plays bishop to c5, attacking the rook and protecting that b4 pawn, as well as activating his own pieces. Rook to e8, rook to e1, contesting the e-file, rook takes, and after queen takes, now he's protecting the b4 pawn. We see b6. Basically chasing the bishop back, but it does activate the bishop somewhat, and then playing bishop to b7. So after rook to d1, all the players are fully developed and we're ready to go into the middle game. White actually has, because of his 2 bishops and better centralized pieces, he does have an advantage, although this b4 pawn is a weakness. So queen to e8, and now he could just play queen takes, but it's Tal this time who goes for complications. Bishop to e5, preventing a queen trade and also just preparing to activate his minor pieces as much as possible. So queen to b5, attacking the b4 pawn, but somewhat removing his queen from the center and active play. And now here's where we see what I'm talking about, psychological play via tactics. So after bishop takes f4, actually the knight could just take, and we'll see 2 lines, both of which are easily defendable. So for example, if we plays queen to e7, attacking the bishop and the f7 pawn, we just see bishop to d5, and black is perfectly equal with white. Or if we see knight to e5, we see again bishop to d5. So again, Tal must have known that his opponent would play this weakening move. He doesn't want to just trade down and give white an initiative, but he plays g takes f6, weakening his king's pawn structure and trying to really attack and win this pawn, going for as many complications as possible. A very bad idea against Tal. So after queen to e4, it looks like black can take, and he does. But now, of course, this doesn't work. It looks like he might win the bishop, but there's actually an x-ray. And if we go for that line, black actually might be winning at this point. Or he'll at least have a very advantageous ending. So we don't see that. After queen takes b4, Tal plays the very simple and logical knight to d4, preparing to centralize and activate this knight to the king side and start a kingside attack, as well as protecting the bishop. So, again, complications that do not favor Tolush. f5. The knight can't take, of course, because it's pinned, but after queen to e5, now there's even more new holes after threatening the knight to exploit on f6. So the knight has to go back, although white could have activated a piece or even his queen, but knight to e7 is pretty much one of the only moves. It's actually a move back, and it allows white to penetrate with queen to f6. Now he's threatening the f7 pawn and mate. Queen takes f7 and then queen to f6 mate. So bishop to d5, trying to defend, but this rook is completely inactive, really needed on the f8 square, but it's too late. So what do you think Tal played here? If you want to pause the video and try to solve it, he could just simply win a piece with knight takes f5. Now if the bishop takes, then we get queen to g7, checkmate. If the knight takes, we get bishop takes d5, threatening the rook and winning this knight. If the queen took, then we get knight takes, and then a very quick checkmate after rook to e1. Instead, Tal played knight to c6, undermining pretty much everything in black's position. Now if the knight takes, we get bishop takes d5, winning a piece, as well as threatening mate, so the queen has to go back. If the bishop took, then we'd simply see checkmate. So after knight to c6, we see queen takes. And now this check, knight check, is very important because the queen was threatening the rook. The king over, and then after the simple rook to e1, threatening mate on h8. Bishop back to try to close off, but after knight takes f5, if the bishop takes, we see checkmate. If the king moves over, we see checkmate. If the king moves over here, we see checkmate on g7. So the only move is actually queen takes b2. And after knight takes f5, Tolush resigned, losing yet another game to Tal. And we see a brilliant demonstration of psychological tactical play at the highest level. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future videos. See you in the future.